Everyone, welcome. My name is Camden Busey. If you don't know, I'm Executive Director of Reformed Forum and a faculty member here. I'm happy to be back in the studio and to be recording a webinar, bringing to you the next in our series of webinars on various topics in Reformed theology. So this is an exciting opportunity for us to be doing some new things. We view the webinars as an important opportunity or ministry for us here at Reformed Forum in order to live up to our name. Our title, of course, is Reformed Forum, and we very much want to have a place where people can come and discuss Reformed theological ideas. My personal intent is that we would speak about everything that falls within the confessional orbit, even ideas that we might not necessarily agree with among the faculty at Reformed Forum, but we are always going to be bringing our Vossian and Vantillian redemptive historical bent and perspective to the conversations that we have, but we're looking to have a wide open format in which we can discuss scholarly topics and important theological matters that face the church in this new venue and this forum. So that's where we see the webinars fitting in alongside our other programs, specifically our podcasts, Christ the Center, Theology Simply Profound, Proclaiming Christ. These are more conversational things, and we're having a conversation today, but some of our webinars certainly end up being more of a scholarly presentation. So we're trying to bring kind of a Reformed perspective to the academic conference, and whereas ETS is always a good meeting, you get a wide breadth of all sorts of things going on at the Evangelical Theological Society, and other than the regional events, it's just once a year. But the webinars, as we seek to build these up, we're hopefully going to be presenting and featuring Reformed Forum as a place where Reformed scholars can come together and discuss some important topics. So let me introduce to you, we have two panelists with us today. We have Carlton Wynn. Everyone knows Carlton if you've been following Reformed Forum. He's one of our faculty members here at Reformed Forum, our newest faculty member, but most significantly, he serves as associate pastor of Westminster PCA in Atlanta, Georgia, and he's also adjunct professor of systematic theology at Reformed Theological Seminary in Atlanta as well. Welcome, Carlton. It's good to see you today.
Man, it is great to be here. So glad to have this chat with Harrison.
Yes, and we have, as Carlton alludes to, Dr. Harrison Perkins, who's pastor of Oakland Hills Community Church. It's an OPC congregation in Michigan. He also serves as online faculty in church history at Westminster Theological Seminary and visiting lecturer in systematic theology at Edinburgh Theological Seminary. Welcome, Harrison. It's great to have you today.
It is great to be here. Thanks for having me on. You
bet. I'm excited. We're today going to be speaking about Harrison's book, Reformed Covenant Theology, a systematic introduction. This is an exceedingly interesting and thorough volume. We're looking forward to discussing a whole host of things that are in here. There's so many topics in this book. We're not going to talk about all of them today. We're focusing most specifically on covenant theology as a theological discipline. So to use maybe the fancy terms, kind of exploring the idea of where covenant theology fits in the theological encyclopedia. So in some regards, it's certainly dependent upon exegetical, biblical, and systematic theology. Harrison has written some interesting sections of his book dealing with a systematic approach to covenant theology and emphasizing the importance of that. So we're going to explore that. Harrison's going to present for a little while, and then we will have a conversation and be able to ask questions. You also can follow along online. I'm seeing we have 57 attendees so far that are watching along. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. And there is a Q&A feature inside of Zoom. So if you can see that at the bottom of your screen, if you're familiar with this webinar format, and I'm getting my sea legs about me regarding this software, but you can find the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom client. And I believe you should be able to submit questions, and I will do my best to keep an eye on these, and either throughout the conversation or toward the end, we'll be able to answer the questions, Lord willing, and be able to discuss some of these matters. I think that's about all I want to mention right now, and without delaying our conversation any further, Harrison, I will hand things over to you. Perhaps maybe you'll just start by explaining the process and your interest in writing this book first, but then take it from there and present whatever you'd like. We're happy to have you, and looking forward to hearing from you, brother.
Absolutely. Thanks, Camden. And Carlton, thanks for being here. I think one of the things that I'm really excited about doing this today is, I at least consider both of you my friends. You'll have to
Sure,
speak
you're
for
my
that
friend.
too on your own side. I don't want to speak for you, but I consider both of you my friends. And so this is good just to get to, I'm thankful that you both taken time to consider what I've written. And certainly it's not a perfect book, and I'd love to hear, what could be improved if there are those things that really need it, but also just how we can use this book. I think that's one of the things I really want to. I hope that it becomes useful for people, and I hope that it can do something to build the discussion, and so then just to outline a couple of things. I'm not going to speak for a super long time, but I wanted to take up four things. So what's the book about first? Well, it's about covenant theology from a Reformed perspective. And just to bring that in more specifically, I tried to focus this book on how, when we talk about covenant theology, it really is about our relationship with God. I think we can lose track of that in amidst the details of covenant theology, amidst different discussions and debates that happen between various traditions and even within our own. I think we can lose track of the scope that covenant theology is at rock bottom about our relationship with God. And so in that respect, it is at least our framework for explaining the most important issue. And in that way, it's not a dry academic thing. It's a dynamic thing. It's about, well, how the Lord meets us, and in the way that He's revealed Himself and the things that He's given to us that we might know Him. It's really about explaining that. It's about communion with God. And I had, in fact, originally suggested a title for this book that was trying to get at that it's really about communion by covenant. Covenants facilitate how we fellowship with the Lord. So that's what the book is about. And it goes about tackling that by, unpacking the three major categories that we have in Reformed Covenant theology: the covenant of works, the covenant of redemption, and the covenant of grace. And trying to take on those topics in organized questions. Is there a covenant between God and Adam? And trying to provide an answer. What is that covenant like? Trying to provide an answer. What's significant that, there was this covenant and what it was like, and kind of trying to answer similar questions about each one of those three. And, each one, in some ways has a few different questions that have to come up, but that's the kind of basic approach I was trying to take. That's what it's about. Second, why this book? Why did I write this book? There were some personal reasons. First, I did my doctoral work in the history of covenant theology, and wrote on James Ussher and his view of the covenant of works. And although I hope that book has some usefulness to the church, I understand that its usefulness is going to be circumscribed, by the nature of that project. And I really wanted to do this. This topic grew more and more in my heart as near and dear to it, and something that really brought a lot of clarity to me as I was trying to pastor God's people. And so I wanted to do something that was more directly helpful to the church. And so that, in that respect, actually, the origins of this book, if it interests people, were during lockdown of 2020. I started making short videos about covenant theology to replace the lack of midweek activities that our church could do. And I had these notes, and I didn't get all the way through all three covenants, But I had these notes that I thought, well, I'll start editing them into something that maybe could be, fit for public consumption. And took some other lectures that I had done. And that, one of the things I do love about this book is that it grew out of my churchly labors. All of it is connected in some respect to my efforts as a pastor, or at least to train other men for the pastoral ministry. So I wanted to do something to help the church more directly than anything else I'd done before. And then second, for myself, to clarify my own thinking. When you do research on a topic, you have a lot of thoughts swirling, and really, I kind of wanted to do a brain dump. It was kind of a cathartic desire. I just want to flush the system and say as much as I can, about all of it, and hopefully then I can kind of move on to other things. And so that was part of it too. I wanted to clarify my own thinking. I had some questions left, to nail down precise answers to some of the issues, and I wanted to do that. And then also just to see if I could manage to get it all in a format that would help. So those are personal reasons why I wrote it. But then what does I hope it, why else? Why another book about covenant theology? I've tried to read really widely in the literature on covenant, not just the history of our tradition, but Baptists are doing a lot with covenant theology now. Nondescript biblical scholars are doing things with covenant theology now, and when you look at that, there's a lot of things to appreciate there, and then you start to ask the question like, well, why are we talking past each other so much? Why is it that we're struggling even to address the exact same issues? I think there's kind of almost an assumption that if we describe the outline of redemptive history according to the covenants, then we can just say, voila, here's our ecclesiology at the end. And that's what we've assumed this discussion is about. Here's how the covenants develop, and then babies are in or out, and I really wanted to say, well, I wanted to highlight, at least Reformed covenant theology has traditionally been about far more than that. Not to say that it has excluded that issue, but that's one of the issues that are down the line from some of the more fundamental concerns. Structuring, clarifying, explaining our soteriology, our anthropology, how we relate to God by creation and by redemption. So there's some really important categories there that I think may have sort of been pushed to the side as the discussion grew across the denominational and traditional boundaries. And so within that, that goal of trying to get over the hurdle of speaking past one another, I wanted to reset the areas of agreement. What does covenant theology help us understand about the nature of, well, how were Old Testament believers saved? That's a big question in the history of our covenant theology. And it's one that almost hasn't gotten much attention until kind of very recently, but not even when this book was in development. And I wanted to say, this is a major feature, the continuity of soteriology across the Testaments is one of the big issues. I think an assumption when people hear us talk about the substance of the covenant of grace being the same is they think we mean every historical covenant is identical, historically speaking. And that's not what we've meant. We've meant that every covenantal administration delivers the same substance, namely Christ and his benefits. And I wanted to put that back on the forefront because that also helps us read our Bibles. This is one of the front piece reasons why we as Reformed Christians believe we should preach Christ from all Scripture, because he's there, and not accidentally, but on, according to God's purpose, he's there. And the things of these previous covenants delivered Christ and his benefits to believers. To push that a little bit further, Uh, I think one of the things as you look at a lot of the books coming out about covenants is the unity of redemptive history is always on the forefront of that discussion. And that's an important point to make. I think one of the things that drove a lot of that literature, a lot of our literature, when it started, the trajectory was, higher criticism was trying to break up the unity of progressive revelation. And you've already hit the Vossian button, and we should hit it. That progressive revelation is organic and unified, and it's not split up. And so it's an important point to demonstrate that the covenants are one way that we see redemptive history as a unified narrative, and that it's one plan. And we shouldn't abandon that. We shouldn't have set that aside. And we needed to come in hard on that for a long time. I think we're at the point, at least within kind of, there's not much we're ever going to be able to do about the liberals. But within conservative Christianity, I think we've accepted that to some degree. Dispensationalism is kind of on the wane, and we accept that this is one plan of salvation. Progressive covenantalism is going to put that on the forefront. The covenants, structure the meta narrative of the one plan of salvation. So that's an agreed point at this juncture in history, and so we've established that. And so coming out of that, that was something we needed to say to push back against some bad scholarly trajectories. But what's the other doctrinal payoff that comes out of that now? Now that we've landed that point and kind of share that amongst ourselves, what else do we do with this? Is that all that it's good for? And I don't think it's good for just that. I think it's good for a lot more things. And so I wanted to set the stage to recenter some of our focus on, well, what are the conclusions? What are the upshots of covenant theology in terms of the rest of how we think about doing doctrine, how we structure our thought, how we explain it? Is covenant theology useful when I'm not preaching Genesis 15, or these passages where God initiates a covenant? Is this still useful when it's not, explicitly on the forefront of the page? I think it is. And so those are some of the reasons why I wrote this book. The third thing, goals. Like what were the goals in that I hope that this book can help us achieve? One of the things that I wanted to get before us is historical continuity. And in this sense, I'm not speaking biblically. I think one of the assumptions is that covenant theology dropped out of the sky at the Reformation. And I tried to, in terms of ranking my sources, one was Scripture. The first one I wanted to appeal to was Scripture. Second, the Reformed Confessions. But then third, I wanted to go to the patristics. There are books out there, about Reformation covenant theology. And I think there are a number of quotes that we've all seen at this point, or at least similar quotes from our writers. And those are good. I don't want to disparage those. I try to use those too. But I wanted to say, we didn't come up with this for the first time. And I'm not trying to argue that Reformed covenant theology is identical to patristic covenant theology. But what I am trying to show is that it aligns with that. That it is at least one extension of ideas and premises that the ancient church itself was seeing in the Bible. And so we stand. We're not new. This is essentially a Protestant defense, right? To read history is to be Protestant because we align with the ancient church and the best of the medievals. That may be fewer in number, but the best of them at least, in the things where they were right and helpful. And so that was one of the things I wanted to show is it's not like the Reformation came along and fractured the tradition and here comes covenant theology. Our covenant theology shares some assumptions, positions, and concerns with the way that the church has always thought about covenants. Second, I wanted to hit the pastoral value that this isn't just about bringing clarity for people as they try to fit the whole Bible together. It is about that. But it also has personal significance. And I really wanted to hit that note a lot. And then thirdly, the third goal is as I tried to focus back on those main concerns of covenant theology, I wanted to try to build bridges. Um, uh, I worked very hard not to be non-polemical in this book. I didn't name anybody who's alive in the main text, and that's because I don't want to take issue with people I know, or even potentially, and that be kind of what people take note of. I wanted to do the best that I could to extend the area of agreement so that we could go further together. Because at the end of the day, theology isn't about being right against each other. It's about being right together. And I really wanted to try to do my best at even the areas of debate, intramurally among the Reformed. I wanted not only to be ironic, because sometimes that's a way to punt, but I wanted to appreciate as much of the concerns and as much of the arguments from views that I may not hold as I possibly could, and I wanted to try to get us further together. That'll be up to people in the future to decide how successful that was, but that was a concern on my heart. And then the last thing that I think is kind of the topic that we might think through together more at length is, well, what about this focus on systematic theology rather than biblical theology? The first thing to say about that is I'm not trying to say don't do biblical theology of covenants. That's not my point. I think we need biblical theology and systematic theology. And so the question of why systematic, not biblical, is more, why did I do systematic rather than biblical theology? And the answer is because other people have done biblical theology of covenants, and other people have done it well and made helpful, contributions in that regard. And I didn't think that I could, do that again, better. There wasn't a reason for me to make that presentation. So I really hope that people might be able to take this book and use it side by side with your favorite biblical theology of the covenants, and that they go hand in hand as much as is possible, and that they inform one another. I assume a lot of biblical theological arguments here and try to invoke them. And so that's one thing is I'm doing ST because BT has been done, and it still needs to be done more. But I did think that I was concerned when a friend of mine said to me, I'm taking a class on covenant theology and I feel like I read the same book 4 times. And that had struck me as well, that I think some of our literature had hit a rut. And what I mean is, well-meaning people have kind of taken the same outline, the same organizational approach to covenant theology. Let me do a chapter, doing an exposition of the passages where God makes a covenant with someone. And that's good. We need that. But we also need to do other things. I think that's the issue. We need to do that and other things. And I think that the reason why that forms a rut that's not that does cause some problems is not so much that people are doing it and rehearsing the same kind of structure and outline. It's actually that as we kept doing that, none of us have built on one another. I don't think people have taken the conclusions of this biblical theological outline of covenants and tried to, leverage it to accomplish something further. They've just kind of hit reset and started again and said, well, I'm going to do it better or slightly different. Here's my take on the issue. And well, what can we do to get further down the road?
It's like cover songs rather than coming up using the song as inspiration for a new composition.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. Absolutely. And so, and the second, I think, heading under ST rather than BT is, this is different exegesis. It's not that it's non-exegetical. Biblical theology is a certain kind of exegesis. And I hope that there's still lots of exegesis in this book. I tried to prioritize that. And one of my reviewers who provided a lot of helpful feedback, I mean, one of the comments was, this is very thorough in some of the exegetical remarks. And he did not mean that as I should leave it that thorough. And so I want to say, this is not leaving behind exegesis of the texts. It's just a different type of exegesis. It's taking a question and then trying to provide the exegetical grounds for your answer to that question, rather than the kind of purely inductive, trace it as it goes. So, it's Voss's, biblical theology is tracing the line, systematic is the circle. And I'm trying to take the scripture as a whole and just ask the question so that we can get a little bit more precise organization of the issues, at least in one place, to help us work through it. And so I think that's an important point I want to make. It's still exegetical. I still aim to be exegetical, just coming at it with a different form of exegesis. And then the last thing is that within that issue, the biblical theological approach to exegesis, grabs hold of these themes or motifs as they develop, and that's great. And the kind of drawback, if that's the right word, because that sounds too negative, is sometimes at the end of a great work of biblical theology, I'm still thinking, okay, I've got all this exegetical information about how this theme develops, but what does it mean? Why is that significant? Why is the fact that theme develops in this way significant? What's the payoff? What does it teach us? What does that mean in terms of understanding how we live with the Lord and our relationship with him? And so, at some point, to grab hold of those hanging threads from biblical theology, well, we have to shift gears to systematic theology. And that's really what I'm just trying to do, is grab hold of some of these issues that maybe have not been penned down in some ways in the BT method, and get a little bit more precision on them. Something like the discussion between are covenants conditional or unconditional? Well, that's gotten a little bit tired because nobody's defined what that means. Well, it doesn't really matter if it's conditional or unconditional if we don't know what it means for a covenant to be conditional or unconditional. So we can debate that all day long, and then at the end of it, we may have no idea why that's significant at all. And so I wanted to sort of drill down on some of the questions that I had coming out of some of the other literature. And so just trying to land the plane on what some of biblical theology's thematic descriptions mean in terms of doctrinal payoff. And that was one of the things that I really wanted to come out of this book in terms of the approach that I took. So those are the things that I wanted to get on the table to set us up for the conversation. I hope that that's helpful to outline kind of what's going on in the book, and why I wrote it, and why I did it the way that I did it. And love to hear your thoughts and chat some about.
Thank you, Harrison. That's wonderful. There's so many things I took notes on and would love to respond to. I'm not going to respond to them all at the moment. I'm sure Carlton has some thoughts. But first off, I very much appreciate the intent and the reminder that covenant theology really is not an arbitrary or an appendix kind of thing. It's not, if we're Christians, we should be interested in covenant theology because this discipline is seeking to describe, as you say, what is most important. And I agree, our relationship with God. God relates to us through covenants. So covenant theology is not optional for the Christian. That's something we all should be concerned with and have a way of explaining and understanding that, because this is the way God relates to us. So that's an important reminder. this is not just something for the scholars. It's something for everyone, and it's not just something for Reformed people or even Protestants. It's for everyone. Now, I also appreciate the spirit in which you wrote the book and the reminder of your intent that we would build on one another and move forward in our conversations. And I agree with you that a lot of times our covenant theology conversations, if we even have conversations, it tends towards lobbing grenades over the walls rather than actually having fruitful and productive conversations. So I appreciate the spirit in which you wrote this and which you're speaking today. And that's even exemplified even in the foreword, where Ligon Duncan wrote a very nice and kind foreword, but also mentioned that he has some differences with you on Moses. And you were telling us at backstage, the virtual backstage, on how that was welcome. He's, not to disclose anything private, but he's like, "You sure you want me to write this?" And you're like, "Yes, this is good."
Absolutely. I looked for someone who didn't take the same view as me on that particular issue, because the Mosaic Covenant has been such a heated topic in Reformed circles. I wanted somebody who took the other view, a different view,
Sure,
from mine, to write the foreword, because I didn't want it to be a partisan book.
One thing I really like, though, about the specific issue of where does covenant theology fit amongst all the other disciplines. And I've been thinking about this for the last couple of weeks since we've kind of scheduled this conversation. We're thinking about talking about your book and what's one specific thing we might focus on in a webinar. And with your systematic approach, I agree with you that it's really important that we would address this from a systematic perspective. But as I was just thinking about covenant theology more generally, it's like a mix of everything. And perhaps we can find other examples that are similar. But among the more traditional loci, the disciplines of study, we have systematic theology, biblical theology. You've mentioned both, and how Voss describes the two. We also have historical theology. And then we have church history, which is even distinct specifically from historical theology, depending on how you define all these. And then, of course, exegetical theology, practical theology, all these different departments. But covenant theology is really informed kind of by all of them. And again, maybe lots of studies are, but as I look at covenant theology, you need to be firmly rooted in exegesis. Well, all your systematics does, but covenant theology especially, but not just exegeting specific passages, understanding them and their progressive unfolding throughout Scripture, so looking at them biblically, theologically. It's helpful also to have a very strong and robust understanding of their development in history. So historical theology is important, and you mentioned that with the patristics and with the medievals. These ideas did not just appear in the 1500s out of nowhere. But particularly with your systematic approach, here's my question for you, Harrison, to maybe get things started, just in having some back and forth. What are we missing when we're not looking at things systematically? And how does your book's focus on covenants from the perspective of ST differ perhaps from the traditional approaches that have emphasized BT? Now, we know that you're not saying don't do BT. That's essential. But if that's all we did, what are we missing? Just for the people that are watching or listening.
I think that we miss some categories that come out of covenant theology that apply more widely than just where we might see them or invoke them if we're kind of on the strictly inductive side. So, passages like in the Gospels where the lawyer comes to Christ and says, "What do I have to do to have eternal life?" And Christ summarizes the moral law. Now, what's going on there? It is that, I mean, you read some folks who are, I mean, I'm thinking of N.T. Wright. I guess, yeah, just to play all the cards. And N.T. Wright says, look what he does. He sends him to the law. And I was like, I don't know in a traditional Reformed sense if that's exactly how we want to say that. I think, is he describing the law? Yes. But is he describing it in a way that ought to confront someone who presumes they can do something to obtain eternal life? And in that regard, I'm grabbing hold of a New Testament passage that isn't, uh, organically related to the creation narratives. And I'm saying, that's actually, he's describing what goes on in the covenant of works. He's describing what happens under the covenant of works. If you want to do something to enter everlasting life, it's fulfill the whole law. And, there's a couple of passages like that. So I think we gain something where we see how this has roots that, spread further than just the leaves that you see on top. So I think that's one of the things going on here. I think also it should be agreed, and it widely is, that the narrative of Scripture culminates in Christ. That's the direction it's pushing. And in that sense, a lot of people are ready to call the progression of the covenants the one plan of salvation that comes to fruition, and culmination, consummation in Jesus Christ. And I kind of say, yeah, but that shouldn't be controversial. Like, we all agree about that. That the Bible culminates in Jesus Christ coming, in the Son of God coming in the incarnation. But what's going on in the means of grace? What's going on for those old covenant believers? Do they know Jesus Christ? Do they have salvation? On what grounds do they have salvation? If it's on different grounds, if their justification was coming out of the Israelites making those animal sacrifices at the temple, if that was actually what provided the forgiveness of their sins in itself, right? Well, Paul's argument in Romans 4 doesn't work, because Abraham actually wasn't justified in the same way we are. He was forgiven because of something else that they did, or David, when he cites Psalm 32. The only way the logic of Romans 4 works is if Abraham and David were justified in the exact same way that we are. And so that means, well, by faith alone, in Christ alone. And okay, then what are the mechanics, so to speak, of how that would come home to all those Old Testament saints? And then you get into covenants are the ways that God has ordained his means of grace in every era. And they're always delivering the same kind of thing. And so if you're just tracing the narrative, I think you lose the opportunity in some ways to get to that point that has been so important to us, to talk about the substance of the covenant of grace. Because I think it's a mistake to leave that vague. I think it doesn't help us to say, well, the substance is the same, meaning they're kind of all doing the same thing. And sometimes that almost sounds like the suggestion, even in our writers. There was this setup where God gave grace. Well, yes, but saving grace always came on the grounds of Jesus Christ. Westminster Confession 8:6 is very clear on this and is so helpful. It's amazing. Although the work of redemption was not yet wrought until the incarnation, yet the virtue, efficacy, and benefits thereof were communicated to the elect from the beginning of the world, in every successive age, in and by those promises, types, and sacrifices. Christ and his benefits were applied to believers through whatever means of grace, which were always word, sacrament, and prayer. Just the sacraments changed, right?
Right.
God's word was always delivered. We were always, able to pray, and the sacraments changed. There were types and shadows rather than, baptism and the Lord's Supper as we have it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you just do the narrative sweep thing, you don't have the obvious opportunity to hone in on that. And that was something I really wanted to grab hold and push in a heavy way. I mean, I thought I was going to do one chapter on that. It turned into 3. And, just on Christ and his benefits as the substance.
Yeah, that's helpful. I love thinking about this too in terms of systematic and biblical theology as mutually informing one another, and in a sense, also regulating one another. Like, we really should never do one without the other, but we do have an maybe overemphasis isn't the right word, but It's much more common to find covenant theology books that are biblical theological and don't have as much systematic emphasis. So your book is warranted on that perspective. Carlton, do you have any thoughts on this or anything else that you want to pick up on?
Yeah, thanks, Camden. So much I appreciate. I could run through a laundry list of wonderful dimensions of this book. It is. I resonate with that reviewer, Harrison. This book is very thorough. I mean, I just kept reading, and I'm like, oh, he's going to deal with that too. Oh, and that too. So I actually really appreciate the breadth of the book. There's something. If you have a question about covenant theology, chances are you address it in the book. I'm tempted to say, given the breadth of covenant theology as we've discussed, that just as union with Christ is sort of the matrix in which we enjoy all the benefits of his redemption, covenant theology is the matrix in which we enjoy all of the blessings of God's revelation. I mean, it's just, as Camden, you articulated, it is the intersection of BT and exegesis and systematics and church history, and one of the things I'll just mention explicitly is how much I appreciate the interface between theology and practical living. All of our theology has to be for life, and really appreciate how in the conclusions of each chapter you talk about how should this affect us, how does this relate to the Christian life, and sometimes the application is marvel at what God has said and done. Harrison, you've said that one of the reasons you wanted to write this book was to go beyond the common agreement that there is only one way of salvation. And I really appreciate that, resonate with that. I think you're right that as dispensationalism, maybe even progressive dispensationalism wanes, everybody's saying, yeah, we're only saved through Christ. But we need to move beyond that statement. That's not enough. That's good, but it's not enough. Secondly, you said we need to go beyond the rut, as you put it kindly, of BT analysis only, because we leave hidden or lingering systematic theological conclusions. And I also resonate with that. I can read, just to get a little specific, like progressive covenantalist writings about the ongoing march of redemptive history, and I can agree with every inductive conclusion by and large. And I long for systematic theological explanations and conclusions. And so the fact that your book tackles that head on is to be welcomed. And the third, going beyond, so going beyond one way of salvation, and that could get taken out of context, going beyond BT only. And you've just articulated a third one that I find very helpful, going beyond, here's how I would put it, mere types and shadows. So much biblical theological analysis of covenant theology says X points to Christ, Y anticipates Christ. And that's so important for people who don't have an understanding of the integrated character of redemptive history. But what your analysis does in terms of the substance of the covenant is to say, not only are these anticipations of Christ in the Old Testament, but these are genuine, inescapable means of grace, whereby the power and saving grace of Jesus Christ was mediated and communicated to Old Testament believers in covenant with God. And that, I think, we've got one question here from Matt Holtz. Really appreciate, what are the most pressing challenges facing covenant theology in the Reformed Presbyterian world? I think both in terms of dialogue and clarity, we need to be very upfront about the beauty of Westminster 7:5 and 8:6 in the confession. As you put it, in and by those types and shadows, the power of Christ was being mediated. Can you talk just a little bit about your view of the significance of that in dialogue with brothers that you're building bridges with?
Yeah. So to start, the reason that you're right, that 7:5 gets at this so this is the thing. Even our confession does biblical theology and systematic theology, right? The last couple of paragraphs of chapter 7 are doing the biblical theological description of covenantal progression, switching from under the time of the law to under the time of the gospel. And so there's that aspect to it. And the same issue is treated from the systematic perspective in 8.6. I really think that's the relationship of those paragraphs. Now, the reason that I grab hold of 8.6 so as my go-to is actually because London Baptist Confession, Second London Baptist Confession, 8.6, repeats it near verbatim. Now, their chapter 7 cuts the parallel paragraphs that would correspond to our closing paragraphs that do that BT, but they have this systematic, statement. And one of the things I want to press is, okay, how do you reckon with that from a Baptist perspective? Now, some of them may be like, I love it. This is great. And because I want to say, this is what we have meant traditionally by the substance of the covenant of grace, that Christ and the virtue, efficacy, and benefits of his work have been communicated through the means of grace in every covenantal era. That's what we have traditionally meant by the substance. And Baptists affirm that in their confession. And so if you want to take issue with that language of the substance of the covenant of grace being the same, well, do you want to take issue with this idea that is in your confession? And that's when we get to because I think one of the, just to, I think to clarify, I think the statement that I had put in the book about what we need to go beyond is that there's one plan of salvation, and really drill down on, do we all agree that there's one way of salvation throughout all redemptive history? And I think that when you ask the question, most people are going to say, yeah, that's what I meant. Or at least I also affirm that. But, sometimes it's worth saying out loud some of these important things. And I have found, Steve Wellum was whom I consider a friend also, and have, through writing this book, have come to be friends with him. And I'm really thankful for his feedback and his kind endorsement in the book. And, as we've talked about this, at least on the side, he's kind of said, well, if that's what you're after by substance of the covenant of grace, then yeah, of course. And I rejoice at that. Good. I'm trying to sort of get this back on the table, that we actually agree more than we disagree, or at least we should. Some of my other Baptist friends, not in the progressive covenantal tradition, I've taken, well, this is all in public and in print. I shouldn't hesitate. I'm not trying to be cagey. Some of our friends in the 1689 Federalist camp have taken issue with saying that the substance of every covenant is the same. And that's where I want to push and say, well, what we've meant by that is that believers under every covenantal epoch have been saved by Christ and his work. And they have received that through whatever means of grace are appointed in that time. So
right.
If you take issue with this label that we've put on it, what are the implications? Are you really taking issue with what we've meant, or are you just trying to frame it a different way? And I think that there are different answers to that question, Frank. I think there's a diversity within that group, and some of the answers are more satisfying to me than others, and some of them are frankly concerning. There's at least as I see it, sometimes a shortcoming in explaining, if you want to say only the new covenant is the covenant of grace, then how are Old Testament believers saved? And that's a big question, partly because not only is it important for them, because we love them and are excited to meet them in glory, but also for the logic of Scripture. In the book of Hebrews, 3 and 4, when it's talking about, well, they were rescued because they believed. When Jude 5 says that Christ saved a people out of Egypt, and then afterwards killed those who didn't believe. Jesus, I mean, Jude names Jesus as the one who does this, the mediator present. So I just want to, the question that's going to come out is, if they still want to affirm the same way of salvation, okay, please help us understand the framework that you want to use to explain how that works, because it's very confusing to deny, what I think is a basic idea in some ways, and not really an idea that I would think would be disagreeable. So if you want to explain it a different way, please do help us, because otherwise we're perturbed by hearing you suggest that maybe the Old Testament saints didn't receive all of salvation. And that is, I think, one of the factors that leads into the reappropriation of the doctrine of the limbus patrum among them, that believers in the Old Testament didn't go to heaven, when they died, but were in kind of a different non-heaven, but non-hell holding
staging area.
Yeah.
Harrison, one of the things that I've borrowed from you is the illustration of one substance, two administrations being akin to going to, in my version, I say going to Moe's. We have a Moe's around the corner from the church, and the big decision that you have to make when you go to Moe's is bowl or burrito.
I worked at a Moe's in college.
Okay. I think you mentioned that, but you threw a curveball, because then you did ice cream in a bowl or a cone. And so I can tell your mind is just working on different delivery mechanisms of the same substance. And I've used that with our people. And they actually bring it up now when I go to Moe's with them, that we are enacting a covenantal sort of having a covenantal meal together. But
which one's more eschatologically advanced, though? That's what I want to know.
I have an answer for that.
Okay.
Because God spoke at many times and in various ways through the prophets. That is the discrete piecemeal unfolding of the bowl that you get delivered at Moe's. But then in the new covenant, he's spoken definitively in a son when everything is gathered up and fulfilled in the burrito of the new covenant. So clear lines of pedagogical usefulness.
I'm going to one up you, because if you actually get into the Hebrew, burrito is his covenant. That's actually his covenant. Burrito.
Well, and at the end of all things, it's going to be rolled up like a scroll, right? I'm sure if we did some translation.
Yes, I love it all. Okay,
burrito.
This is dovetailing with this conversation.
This is really good ST right now, just so everyone knows. This is really good.
Just wait, Camden, because on page 83, I laughed out loud reading Harrison's book, because he mentions a Leiden theologian named Taco Hajo van den Honert. And then he says, he's like in the middle of this discussion of the tree of life being the sacramental communication of eschatological beatitude. Harrison mentions this guy Taco, who happened to have the best name in Reformed theology, Harrison writes. And I just laughed out loud when I read about Taco.
So I will come clean with you guys in public. Even though that book is in Latin, I dug through it just to find something I could use
to put his name in. I looked him up before I came, and did you know that Taco Hajo van den Honert was also a champion field hockey player from the Netherlands who won a gold medal at the 96 games in Atlanta?
Oh, man.
So that's the first Taco van den Honert that you'll come up with on Wikipedia. You have to dig a little farther to find the 17th century Leiden theologian.
There is done. Famous defensive end for Michigan.
Latin reference.
Taco Charlton played at Michigan, and he also played for the Dallas Cowboys. But I think that having the Dutch last name is a little bit more esteemed.
It's great. Camden, we have a lot of questions building up.
I know.
Do you want to go rapid fire again?
Sure.
Harrison,
so first,
where we give him just 10 seconds each question.
Well, we'll fire him off at Harrison and see what you think, Harrison. We don't have to answer all of them. We are scheduled for an hour, but I'm happy to go longer if you'd like, if you are able. the stated topic of our conversation was to more focus on the systematic approach. We've addressed that. So, I mean, Harrison, you're not on the hook to answer any and every question that people have asked that don't necessarily apply specifically to that topic, but we can ask them regardless. So Matt Holstar, our buddy, has already asked, and Carlton raised this and kind of gave his own thought or two, at least suggesting a thought on this. But Harrison, what do you think are some of the most pressing challenges facing covenant theology from the Reformed and Presbyterian world? Does anything come to mind?
So I think there are two things to say there. One, I'm encouraged personally by the attention that covenant theology is getting, and glad to see literature coming out. And one of the things that I hope that we do going forward is to do lots of different things about covenant theology. It's good to write another book about biblical theology of the covenants. I hope there are more books about systematics. I hope there are also books addressing particular issues in covenant theology, and taking the deep dive into that. What are the challenges? I think that the lack of clarity we've had about what some of these things mean, various groups are trying to appeal to covenant, and I mean within the Reformed community. The Federal Vision wants to use covenant to, suggest their understanding of things, and it's not the way that we do it. And so the bringing together the works in grace aspect, I think, is one, a primary reason why we've used covenant theology in our history. But two, also a thing that we need to grab hold of again. So I think the challenges, the two that I would name, are the things that are really two of the things that I've emphasized the most. One, so it's an exhortation, use covenant theology to explain clearly to your people why grace is free and why we also have an obligation to live well before the Lord. These things can be harmonized. Covenant theology helps us do them. We don't have to be legalist or antinomians, and we shouldn't be either. We should be Reformed Covenant theologians. And so I'd say use it for that. Also, in today's era, I think church membership is one of those things that's in real question. People don't like it. And there may be some encouraging turns, but there is this sense of why does it matter if I'm at church? Why does it matter if I'm committed to a particular church, as long as I know God? And I think that the diminishment of the means of grace is a real challenge for covenant theology. And those issues are, intertwined, the means of grace ministry and covenant theology, because one explains the other. Means of grace are just the experience, the things that you do as they're appointed within God's covenant. And so use covenant theology to teach people why the church is necessary. This is the place where God has promised to meet us. And that is too often called into question. So I think that's the way that I would come at that question.
That's good. Let's get a little spicy here on the burrito topic, or the burrito theme, I should ask. Here's one. Take this as you will, but this can also be an open conversation. But John asks if whether you come down on one side or the other, or I guess maybe how do you address the issue of the republication of the covenant of works, Harrison? Is that what's your particular thought on that? And do you have any suggestions for maybe how we as a church continue the conversation on that particular front?
Yes. So I guess to say it, just at the outset, I mean, I'm highly sympathetic to what Meredith Kline was trying to articulate, in terms of he called it a republication of the covenant of works. Now, there's been a lot of debate about that, and admittedly, that's probably whether my fault or just by necessity of what happens in that discussion, that's probably the spiciest chapter in the book. And I kind of hope so, because I didn't aim for any of it to be all that spicy. I have tried to hear the concerns. I think that's one of the things. Is I have tried to sympathize with why people either are not getting some of the points that, maybe would reconcile how they're seeing things with this view, and make it a little bit more acceptable. I've tried to change the rhetoric some. I mean, neither, if you're at either polar end of this discussion, you're probably going to be mad at my chapter on this, because I've really wanted to build the bridge best I can and say, look, here are some of the concerns that people have from, the Klein-ish side, and why we're saying it this way. It's not just we're doubling down. I didn't want to just say it again. That's something that frustrates me, is if we just repeat ourselves and think that, and Camden, you and I just saw this at General Assembly, right? When it comes to debates.
You mean people repeat themselves and repeat other speeches?
That one
really?
guy has that notion. I know this has been said, but when I say it, it'll be amazing and everybody will buy in. And I really didn't want to do that. And so I think one of the things for us to do in this discussion is try to hear each other. What are the reasons why we're taking these views? And that's perhaps one of the reasons why the systematic approach can help us push past some of the disagreement. Some of it is because when you come at the biblical theological, you're just looking at, well, how does this flow in the narrative side? And you don't always have the opportunity to kind of look under the hood to see, why is it doing that? And I've tried to poke harder at why. And then, okay, given that, how can we help each other? So instead of saying that, I mean, I should be clear. I think the Mosaic Covenant is an administration of the covenant of grace. And that's the starting point, and should be the starting point for all of us. And so one of the things I hope this chapter accomplishes is, even if we part ways, even if we disagree on this issue, I hope that if you see what I'm trying to say in that chapter, the road forks further down the road than it did before you read the chapter. The divergence is longer down the pathway than it was before, because the Mosaic Covenant is an administration of the covenant of grace, which means its ordinances applied Christ and his benefits to believers. Okay, now that's what we mean by substance. Now, at that point, we're starting to ask the question, okay, what are the types and shadows under Moses that God used as means of grace? And some of us are, I'm of the persuasion that these types and shadows resemble the covenant of works. That's the way I've tried to put it to help moderate the language. I don't think that people have said it that way before, which is probably why, like, the hardcore Kleinians may not like it. I've not just said it the way Klein said it. Like, well, I'm sorry. I don't think that's how this works. We got to hear each other and do this together. I think the types resemble the covenant of works. That doesn't mean it is a covenant of works. That doesn't mean that there's real merit that these people could have achieved. That doesn't mean that salvation could have been had, by works. It means that the types were there for a specific function, to teach about the sort of thing that Christ would do for us. And so in that respect, it's not even just works, in the abstract. It's the types resemble the covenant of works to further the purposes of grace at the redemptive, historical, and Ordo Salutis level. It furthers the purpose of grace because we needed this teaching tool to show the condition of the whole world under the curse of the law. And the Mosaic Covenant does that, in my opinion. And
Harrison,
so it was clearer when Christ came, what he was fulfilling, the debts he was paying, both in terms of our need to furnish positive righteousness, active obedience, and passive obedience. He was paying our penalty. And so we have these structures that teach us about what Christ would do. And those types, in as much as they were appointed to, be about Jesus, well, they were means of grace. And that's at the Ordo Salutis level, right? They're sacramental, delivering Christ and his benefits to believers, to those who receive them by faith. Now, people may disagree that these types resemble the covenant of works. Okay, fine, fine, that's fine. We've been having this debate a long time, but I think one of the places to land is, if we get to that point where we're saying, but now we're disagreeing about what the types are and how they are kind of pivoting in redemptive history. Well, we've got a lot of runway where we actually agree that this is an administration of the covenant of grace. These types, whatever they resemble, are delivering Christ and his benefits to believers. And that relativizes the disagreement. It doesn't make it unimportant, but it relativizes it. And so, yeah, there's my take on that and what I've hoped to achieve.
Carlton?
Yeah, Harrison, I don't want to continue on the Mosaic covenant, but you just one little thread. You said the types resemble the covenant of works. If I were to unpack that from my own perspective, I think I'd say the way in which God uses the types in relation to God's call for obedience from Israel resembles God's demand for obedience unto eschatological life for Adam. Can you give an example of a type that is also a means of grace and yet also somehow resembles the covenant of works in the way that you understand that phrase?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the animal sacrifices are the obvious one. I mean, they're a big ticket item. Now, is that a demand for obedience? In the positive sense that was there for Adam. No, I understand that, at least the sin offerings. But one of the things that is going on is that, well, those animal sacrifices, the sin offerings, don't forgive sin. Jesus does that, right, in his death. But his death is the payment because we are condemned under the covenant of works. Adam's sin is imputed to us, and we have this curse. Because Adam's sin is imputed to us, we're cursed via the covenant of works. And the animal sacrifice is teaching about how Christ paid the penalty that comes to us from the covenant of works. So there's a structure there where Israel had to do something, and it relates to a category that falls out of what we have in the covenant of works, right? That's where our need for forgiveness comes from. That's where the penalty debt originated, is Adam's original sin, and his guilt is imputed to us. And so I don't even know that I'm just trying to point out how the types relate to things that have their origin in the covenant of works. And maybe that's an even more precise way to put it. And then so holistically it resembles it. Yeah, I guess if that helps.
Yeah, no, that does help. Certainly all the redemptive types and shadows presuppose the covenant of works and vividly typify the death of Christ, certainly the sacrifices that is the consequence of our having broken the covenant.
Maybe we can ask one more, Harrison, if you don't mind, or maybe two, but let's see here. I don't know if we want to open this up. I suppose we will. But let me ask this. Just in general, he says, given your take on Romans 2:13, he's wondering, the questioner who asks anonymously, please respond to Mark Jones' contention that, quote, some imagine that the classical Reformed position on Romans 2:5-16 has in view only a hypothetical possibility. But many Reformed theologians did not adopt the hypothetical view, such as Butzer, John Ball, Thomas Manton, Herman Vitzius, Bahamas Abrakel, and Petrus van Maastricht. You could take that as a impressionistic jumping off point if you'd like, but I'm wondering if you might talk a little bit or sketch some thoughts out regarding the hypothetical view.
Well, the claim there, from a historical perspective, is some Reformed theologians took this, adopted this exegesis of a particular text. Okay, others didn't.
Yeah.
Others outlined the view that I do. So, at that point, you kind of say, what's really going on here? Are you trying to make room? Is the goal to make room for two exegetical sets of exegetical conclusions, or is the goal to tip it the other way? Now, I've said in the appendix, right, and it's interesting. I suppose in terms of like thinking through what questions you ask, if it's an appendix, is it the main issue? And I guess my suggestion in putting it that way is obvious, that this isn't really a thing that I'm staking my flag to go after anybody on this point. But I've not said it's hypothetical. I've said Romans 2 is about how things work under the law, as a covenant of works.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, it's real. The doer of the law will be justified. That's not hypothetical, as if it couldn't happen. It's just sinners can't meet that criteria. And so it won't happen for anyone who, has sin to their record.
Mm-hmm.
So Jesus is, the one who could do it. I don't think that the question as it stands requires much more than that. Well, if we're setting forward that some Reformed theologians took a different exegesis of that text than I do, well, some took the exegesis that I do. As I've looked at the historical commentaries on that passage, my personal sense is that my view is more dominant.
It's an interesting issue. I've always wondered whether the hypothetical view is inappropriately labeled, in a sense. And
I've suggested that.
Correct me, because I think you and I might agree more on this. I'm still in flux a bit, but thinking a lot about this. There's a bigger question is, let's say, that we know everyone's condemned in sin because of original sin. Everyone who descends from Adam via ordinary generation is condemned. So there's no possibility of achieving or fulfilling the law. Nevertheless, hypothetically speaking, if someone were able to do it or just got lucky or something and fulfilled the law, we know it can't. It's a zero set issue. There's no one that fills this set other than Christ. But hypothetically, if someone could, for example, do everything the law required, the law of Moses required, would they earn salvation? And my thought is, I don't think so. I think that's impossible too, even if they fulfilled it, because the law was never given with that intent. It was always given with an eschatological view to the fulfillment that we would have in Christ. So the law given at Sinai was never meant to redeem, and it was never meant to be granted as this opportunity for a works-based salvation. I follow more of Klein in terms of the national aspect to the Mosaic economy and the Mosaic covenant myself, but that too, I have a lot of charity on that because there's a lot of things to discuss and to parcel out. But anyway, the idea of the hypothetical view, there's like two ways to use that word hypothetical, and I don't think everyone is clear necessarily on how that word gets applied in this particular situation.
Carlton, do you want to take a stab at that, or?
I don't think so. I've been trying to pound away on some of these other questions.
Right.
On Romans, yeah, the only thing I'll say is on Romans 2, I think a key issue is Paul introducing gospel categories before he finally launches into Romans 3, but now the gospel and atonement and propitiation. But as he
clearly says no one can do this,
the gospel,
right?
Yeah, but as he sufficiently introduced the gospel so that he could say that those who pursue after righteousness and honor will attain eternal life in Christ.
I think 319 is his wrap up of everything from 118 to 319, and no one will do this, right? That's
my take.
To Camden's question, so you can come at it two different ways, right? Historically, I think that this has been a debated issue. Is the covenant of works a live option if you could do it? And I think some guys kind of have a category for saying, yeah, if you could do it, then you'd obtain the reward. And others say no. And I fall with you on the no. The reason being because the law was the moral law, the law of nature, was given to Adam as a covenant of works. It is the law that is the covenant of works.
Yes.
But it doesn't continue as a covenant of works for anyone except him. As such. Now we kill. There's still kind of there's this mist coming off of it, right? There's the fog that comes out, like where the covenant of works still has an effect that's projected over all of us because of its conclusion, because of how it was resolved. Adam broke it, and so is it still in force in one way, in a sense? Yes. But no, God didn't appoint anyone else as the representative besides Jesus Christ, right? He didn't offer it to every individual,
right?
If you can do this, then you and your posterity will obtain everlasting life,
right?
And so I think that the covenantal aspect of the covenant of works, fixes the possibility to Adam himself.
I agree with you. Just to be clear on perhaps my biblical theological reasoning, and this isn't all developed in this webinar, obviously, but if you look at passages like Romans 8:3, for God has done what the law weakened by the flesh could not do. Now, some people may say, well, that's only applying to fallen sinners. Indeed, it is. But you also look at Galatians 2:3, and the whole purpose of the law as a pedagogue for a people under age, and I'm speaking of Moses specifically, and then Hebrews 7, talking about this whole immaturity to maturity motif. I think there's an important redemptive historical function of the law of Moses that is unique, that I personally don't think that what is often called the hypothetical view fully accounts for. That's basically all I want to say.
Yeah, I really resonate with what you say, Harrison. I mean, I think eschatological life is secured and communicated by one of two Adams. It's not communicated by Adam had he obeyed. It's communicated by the Lord and through the Son. But yeah, God doesn't make an independent covenant of works with every little believer. No more than Noah, Abraham, or Moses are like little Adams, not ATOM, but ADAMs, like having a new opportunity to do what Adam didn't do. Correct. And then they keep failing, and only then does Christ arrive. No, there was never a bona fide covenant of works with eschatological beatitude made with any of those federal heads with a little f in their covenantal epoch. Agreed?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that gets us to one of the points that one of the other tie-ins of covenant theology to other disciplines, and Carlton and I have talked a lot about this. He knows I've got a book coming out on covenantal anthropology. I think God made our human nature that so that human nature has the end of everlasting glorified life, beatific vision, whatever however you want to label it. Like that's not the issue of debate here. We have that end attached to our nature, but the means to procure it are covenantal, and it happens to be that, in the covenant of works. So this gets at, like, well, why is it still universally significant? Well, because all of us with human nature still have that same end. We still have the purpose of fellowship with God in everlasting blessedness. Now, we can only attain that now by faith in Jesus Christ. He has earned it for us. And the thing that then sort of, so that preserves, I think, the concern for the universality of the covenant of works. To say God fashioned our nature for that end, for that telos. And then the finality of the covenant of works on the other side is, well, but the means to obtain that was offered on the condition of works to Adam. If he fulfilled what was essentially his natural duty, encapsulated in a symbolic command about the tree, well, then God would have given him that reward of obtaining the end that he fashioned for, into our nature. But the means aren't just hanging out there for anyone to achieve, even if that end is still fixed to our nature. We can't escape that as our end.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that we have the criteria that we can just do it.
Mm-hmm. That's very helpful. I think it's probably about time for us to wrap up, especially with all this talk of the eschatological burrito. I might need to go find myself one of those. It's lunchtime, but Harrison, Carlton, it's been a pleasure. Really appreciate you coming on and talking about this, and we'd certainly love to continue the conversation in maybe future webinar sessions or podcasts, but this has been really fun, brothers. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Thanks for reading the book, giving some attention to it. I'm very thankful.
That was my delight. Loved being here with you guys.
Amen. The book, for people who may not know already, it is Reformed Covenant Theology, a Systematic Introduction by our guest today, Harrison Perkins. It's published by Lexham Academic. I failed to mention that at the beginning, and I apologize. Lexham Academic. It's a wonderful book, very thorough, as we've said, but wonderfully laid out. It's a good volume. You can get a copy. We'll have links appropriately in the episode description. Again, this has been a webinar, so we've been experimenting with this. We did a webinar on Reformed moral theology. We did one on the Reformation in the Francophone world. We're looking at, we did one on kind of Alan Strange's book and Christian nationalism, and possibly working on some others on the Italian Reformation and some other topics in not only biblical and systematic theology and church history, but also some topics in practical theology and just other related topics. I've been debating doing a webinar on kind of my tech stack for doing theological research. So if anyone's interested in taking notes and documenting sources and what I use for that, if you think that would be a fun webinar, then I'd like to do one. And if you like this format, which we're doing in addition to our podcast, not in place of the podcast, let us know. We like having the live interaction and the questions.
Like BT and ST.
Yes, you got it. The webinar fitting in here is mutually beneficial and supportive. So you can find information about our events and our publications and our online courses all at reformedforum.org. But I do want to thank everyone, especially for tuning in live. We had more than 70 people at the peak. That's a good lunch hour little bring your own lunch and watch some conversation on covenant theology. That's a good showing. So we appreciate that, and hopefully we'll grow that into the future. But I do want to thank everybody also for listening after the fact and for watching. And we hope you come back for our next webinar here at Reformed Forum.